Hey everyone, Joe here. Just working on some terrain stuff for Infiniwar, and I figured I'd bring you along for the ride. It's time to make this a real devlog. I'm actually working on stuff, and I'm going to show it to you. So we've got an Infiniwar level here, one that I generated earlier, and the thing that I've been working on recently is terrain. I know I said I was going to be working on the demo, and I am, I promise. So here's how the terrain fits into the demo. I wanted to have some additional scenes in the demo for other purposes outside of battle, but I wanted the terrain to be able to display and be able to render terrain outside of a battle. I'm working on what I'm calling sort of the planning mode, which is where you go between battles to plan your next battle, which is going to be an important part of the demo game loop. I needed to be able to render terrain in that mode because I wanted to show something. It will just be terrain for now, but eventually it'll be like your base, like your military base or wherever your forces are stationed. But for now, it'll just be terrain. The base will come later. I realized that I had built the terrain system entirely around the concept of being in a battle. When you do that for multiple years, you make all kinds of decisions, large and small, about how to structure things. And then when you want that system to appear somewhere else outside of the context of a battle, there's all kinds of stuff that you don't want to have to bring over. All the rules about how combat works and how battles can be won and lost and all that other stuff. Like I just want terrain in this mode. So I needed to do a better job of separating out just the terrain system. And I started doing that with a new scene that is, you'll see it's called Terrain Editor. Now don't get excited. This doesn't mean I'm going to ship a terrain editor in Infiniwar. Maybe. But probably not the kind you're thinking. This is just a scene for me to edit terrain. There's a different scene somewhere in here, which is the planning mode, which I'm not going to show right now because it's not ready. So the terrain editor is, the terrain editor scene is just a Unity editor scene for just showing the terrain and nothing else. It was like a test bed. And so that's what we're looking at now. So I did succeed in making that happen. I can generate a full Infiniwar map in a separate scene without any of the other battle baggage coming along for the ride. And that's important. So that was step one, is just allow terrain to work in a scene that isn't the one scene of the game, the battle scene. Okay, there were actually two scenes. There was the menu scene, which had nothing but UI. There was no 3D anything, and the battle scene. But now there's a few scenes now, but now any scene can have the terrain stuff, just the terrain stuff in it pretty easily. So that was the first hurdle, is get terrain rendering in its own scene if I need it. And now I can do that. So like we can come up to here and let's just generate a new map. There we go. So we're inside of a mountain. But yeah, so we've got a new map with the same sort of terrain template. I'll go over that probably not today because I don't know if I have enough time to do that. But I am interested in showing everyone like how Infiniwar thinks about the multiple layers that make up a procedural map. I think that is maybe interesting, and yeah, so I don't know, maybe I'll show that at some point. So the next thing that I wanted to do to make sure that I could render terrain in the planning scene and other scenes that need it, but the planning scene being the scene that needed it. In an earlier video, in an Infiniwar archive video actually, I showed just some of the basics of how the terrain system is set up, how it's sort of broken into these different chunks, and that the system was pretty stupid. Like, I just had 30 or however many terrain chunks that I had manually placed around at just the right coordinates, and then different chunks could generate the terrain. But it was pretty stupid in that they had to be set up in that exact way. There was no way to have more chunks. Like if I wanted terrain rendering farther in the distance, there was no way to do that. Getting back to the demo, because why is this important for the demo? Do we really need it? I mean, I guess not really, not technically, But because the planning view is so central to the demo, and because I want the terrain to be visible in the demo view, or the planning view, I didn't want to propagate old, quick and dirty prototyping decisions into a new area of the game, into a new area of the code. So I decided it was time to clean that up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this map a lot uglier, just so that we can work with it and kind of see it at a higher level. So I'm going to turn off all of the fog and particles and light rays, and it's going to look pretty bad. So just bear with me. Okay. And so now that we've got that, we can sort of, zoom up above the horizon and see sort of the very, very bird's eye view. Now, obviously, like this whole area, this is like a whole map. This is 2.5 square kilometers, I think, if I've got the calculations right. So it's a pretty big area to fight in. The maps feel pretty big. They feel about the size of a World in Conflict map, if you've ever played that. I think that's roughly about the scale that they were going for, because each square here, if you can see these squares, we'll turn the wireframe back on, is 10 meters by 10 meters. So that's pretty big. Like you've got like, an American football field like right here is a pretty big sized area. Okay, so we'll turn that back off. All right, so zooming back out, we've got this square pattern. We can even go, so this is the middle chunk, the main chunk where the battle actually takes place. And you can see that there's these sort of rings of chunks around it. And previously this was all hand placed, all manually placed chunks. The chunks still generated procedurally, but the actual, like, there being a chunk there was just hard coded. And also there weren't these corner chunks before. Like if I deleted those, it was sort of a plus shape. That's just an artifact of the new algorithm that I'm using. So we've got sort of a central chunk and then 2 rings of chunks around it, basically. And now, not there, here, radius chunks. So I've got this radius chunks that I can play with. I can set this to 0, which will not generate any of those sort of out of bounds chunks. This is actually really useful for debugging for me now, for all kinds of reasons, but for one big reason is it's just a lot faster to only generate 1 chunk. So if I'm really annoyed by how slow or fast the terrain generation is, like you can see I can sort of zip through a bunch of different maps here, sort of showing the power of the terrain generation here very quickly, without all those outside chunks being generated. So that's useful in and of itself. And that's just kind of a general theme of anytime you're sort of cleaning up and improving your tooling, improving your workspace, it's going to pay dividends even in ways you don't expect or you're not planning for right away. It'll just make things nicer to work with. So setting that to 1. We get 1 set of chunks around it. So you can see already, we're actually generating basically 10 times the amount of terrain, or 9 times, I guess, because we've got 9 chunks. If I generate a second ring, so now we've got, this was roughly the size the map was before, but we can go further if we want. So we can add a third ring. And now you can see it's actually going to get this sort of old plus pattern that was visible before. And it's actually generating in a radius. It's sort of approximating a circle. It doesn't look much like a circle yet because it's very, like it's sort of each chunk is a pixel of the circle. So it's a very extremely pixelated circle. You can imagine drawing a circle in like MS Paint or something. We can go crazy. Let's do 16. This is going to take a little bit. Okay. But yeah, this was a big step for the Infiniwar terrain system because it's a system that has been in the game since literally the very beginning. The very first thing that I built in the game was a very simple single chunk procedural terrain system. Very, very basic, not as detailed as it is now. And that means that because the system is very old, it has some very old decisions and lots of stuff that was baked into it out of expedience, but maybe not entirely wisely. I'm okay with it though, because it allowed me to move fast and prototype. And I think it's easy to get too hung up on making things perfect the first time around. And that can be overwhelming, and you just end up not working on it at all as an excuse, or using the excuse that it won't be perfect the first time around as an excuse to not work on it at all. So I think that's, it's better to accept that things will be imperfect and that you can fix them later. I think new and inexperienced developers fall in the trap of thinking that if they don't get it perfect right from the beginning, it will be literally impossible to fix later. This isn't good. Like, you need to be able to change things, even big things, later. Now, within reason. Sometimes you make decisions early on that you know are big decisions, like, I'm going to make a 3D game instead of a 2D game. Like, changing Infiniwar to be like a 2D pixel art game would be, at this point, would be a little bit silly. Like, that's a pretty big change. But something like, well, I started the terrain system in the very beginning multiple years ago, 2 years ago, and there's no way that I could make a big change to that system at this point. That's not a healthy attitude to have towards something like that. So, and I think it's important to keep in mind that, yeah, you can make big sweeping changes, refactorings to even big complicated systems later, especially if you adhere to just some general best practices early on. You don't have to do things perfectly. You don't have to follow the perfect design patterns. You don't have to use, like, you know, crazy dependency injection frameworks or something like that. Like, you don't need to do any of that stuff. You just need to sort of take it slow and take it one step at a time. So just a few quick member announcements to make. So Esposito Adam, you earned your 1 month, I think your 1 month service medal. So thank you, sir, for sticking around. And thank you to all of my channel members, General Goman Snana. We've got commissioned officers Trieve Black Tiger, Esposito Adam, Ryan Grill, and then we've also got our 2 NCOs, ALX 2079 and Lisa Parrott. So thank you to all of my members for supporting the channel, supporting ongoing development of Infiniwar. I haven't forgotten about you all. I'm still here, hard at work on the game, and looking forward to bringing you more content like this in the future. So I hope you liked it. Anyway, that'll be all from me. As always, thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video.